low-quality fans of a high-quality Bruins franchise. It's the offseason. Franchise would be a normal statement to make right now. It has nothing to do with how dog water the team was this year. It still feels kind of surreal thinking about the season the Bruins had and just how bad it was. Like, I get having a down year. It was a bad year. God, what a bad year. But, fun fact for all you Bruins fans out there, the Habs are eliminated from the playoffs. Got them. You love to see it. You love to see it. What a fun time it is. Hey, by the way, quick opinion early on. Comment early. I don't know. But let me know your opinion on this, because watching the playoffs, and we're watching a lot of them. I'm sure you are too. This has been a pretty good first round. There's a lot to like about it. I know there's all that talk about there's not enough people watching and no game has hit a certain threshold. And honestly, they've still been awesome. So I don't know. I'm not a big wig making big money in TV to figure all this stuff out. But I've been watching a lot of the games. I don't know. Would the Bruins reasonably compete with any playoff team in the first round? Because even pre-deadline, no. They're getting dog-walked. Just absolutely demolished. I don't get 8th seed and everything. Like, obviously, the 8th seed in the West is not a typical 8th seed. Welcome to the Blues. But even Montreal in the East, I think Montreal wipes us right now. Like, that's how bad this year was. It doesn't mean we can't get back quickly. We're going to have a lot of conversations about that during the summer. But, yeah, not a first round that made me go, oh, the Bruins belong as part of this. They should have. No, they should not have. I am so glad as time goes on that the Bruins decided to blow it up at the deadline. I really am. Now we can talk about the effectiveness and how well that actually went, and obviously it'll be years down the road until we fully understand it, but it was the right choice. It was the right choice, because even without the massive losing streak after the trade deadline, and if they squeaked into that 8th seat, no, this team was not good enough in any way, shape, or form. Very happy with that decision. Anyway, we're doing player grades in the season. I guess all this conversation does kind of bleed into what we're actually talking about today. Likely a long video would be my expectation. We are going to mention the mid-season grades that I did as well in January. It was January 12th when the version of this video came out for the mid-season grades, which I find pretty interesting. But a couple quick things about it. First of all, the rules. How I do this. As usual, these are based off expectation. Pastrnak and Peeke aren't graded on the same curve. A grade of C is you are meeting expectations exactly. Not positional expectations, not contract expectations, realistic expectations that I've made up by my mind. Which means I do have to explain my expectations before certain grades. Which also means that if my expectation differs from yours, kind of just do the scale and figure out what grade you would give them based on this kind of setup. I'd love to hear your opinions below. If a fourth line guy is asked to play second line minutes, obviously he's getting a boost to his grade, even if he isn't playing at a second line pace. And so a C is not a bad grade. That's what I really want to get across with this. Not a bad grade. It just means you are simply where we expected you to be. A B would be a positive impact, just a bit above expectations. And an A is you are absolutely crushing it, or something happened that made what you did far more impressive. D's and F's are basically exactly what you think they are. We are grading their on-ice impact. Injuries should not be considered, but it's impossible to not speak of chronic stuff players are working out, so that will come up a little bit. There will certainly be some gray area for those who are dealing with that kind of stuff. This is my team. They are a team that I love and cherish, and I know I am biased about all sorts of things. And I've worked very hard to try to remove as much bias as possible. I try to be a very steady voice, very steady mind when it comes to the Bruins in general. I work really hard at that. And sometimes it has me leaning on both sides of the fence. I understand that. But these are also real human beings. So we can't just default to an F for everyone who's had struggles. And I am trying to find some positivity where I can. That being said, I know certain comments will likely contradict others depending on which player I'm talking about. I do understand that. It's impossible to do a video like this without it. Each player is case by case. I tried to keep it as fair as I possibly could. There will be very few instances where off-ice shenanigans come into play for the grade, but they will happen. There are a couple that do change the grade a little bit. So we will get there. Also, list of incomplete or ungraded players. Basically, it's just Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy that didn't get to play enough. Frankly, that's just... I mean, McAvoy at the midseason grades had an F because his play was not good to start the year. But now it's just an incomplete grade. We're not going to bother. Hampus obviously played very little this year. And then anyone with less than 20 games played outside of special cases, I didn't really include. So there's a few names that are like AHL tweeners that just aren't going to be involved here. And for what it's worth, Hampus Lindholm was an A- at the midseason grades, as he was our best player or second best player through the early portions of the season. I am going in order of grade. So we're going to start with our A+, because I honestly think the failed grades, which there's more of them, but I think the negative grades are far more interesting, but we're going to start with some of the easy ones, which are your A+. And your first A+ should be very obvious for anyone who's paid attention at all this season. David freaking Pastrnak. Now, David Pasternak's a fun one for me, because at the midseason, he had a C-. And what's blowing my mind is I looked at this, and I still have my notes up from the midseason grades. 45 points in 45 games played, 19 goals, 26 assists, led the team in points, obviously. In fact, he would be almost at the midseason mark, clearing everyone else's season totals. 82 points, though, was what he was on pace for, which would be his lowest pace since 2021. I had a whole spiel about how the offense on the team is non-existent most nights. He's getting no help, but this is well below his expected performance. So it still felt like he was just below average, a C-. And I even said he's still a superstar, and if the Bruins can ever bring in another top-line talent, he'll push back to the 100-point plateau. That being said, it's a pipe dream this year. He finished the season with 106 points, 43 goals, 63 assists, and 82 games played. He tied for third in the NHL in points. He scored 61 points over his last 37 games. What the fuck? That is nothing short of miraculous. And not just because... 106 points is almost an expectation for him at this point to start the year. Like a C, right? You met expectations. No. As we continued to watch this team flounder, and I'm surprised I didn't have more grace for him 45 games into the season, but the team was awful offensively without him on the ice. They were terrible. He fully carried the offense for months. He finished third in the NHL in points on this team, on one of the worst offensive teams, both by money spent and performance in the league. And he finished with third in the NHL in points. What? It's absurd. All right, I'm spending too long on this. You get it. He's begging for a real 1C. He won't get it next year, but he's begging for it. He's been such a great leader. As soon as the trade deadline happened, it's like he found a new persona and just started being this rock solid, great quotes, telling everyone and showing everyone that the losing was unacceptable. A+. Sorry, did I not say the grade yet? A+ at the end of the year. His second half was that good. A+ for the leadership voice off the ice. I'm already breaking that rule. We were already doing off-ice stuff. And for just the gaudy point total when he had almost no help. And what won't surprise you is the little help he did have is your only other A+. He might be actually our only other A. Yeah, our only other A at all is Morgan Geekie. At the mid-season mark, he actually had an A- because he was on a pace for a career high. He doesn't take frequent penalties. He's was scratched for a little while there, but this was after that scratching happened, and then he started to really take off. And we were like, you know what? He's playing way above his station in a top-line role. So, yeah, we're going to give him an A- at the midseason, right? It was only the first 2 months of the year that we were really upset at Geekie. Just a total black hole. Couldn't seem to do anything offensively, just struggling. But he turned it on, and then he turned it on for the rest of the year. He'll finish the year with 33 goals, 24 assists for 57 points in 77 games played. Second on the team in goals and points. A career year and then some. I've been consistent in insisting that when this team is built like a true contender, he's a third-line player who can jump up in the lineup in times of need. Well, he had to do that all year and turned in a goal-scoring season that wouldn't just match a first-line talent, but put him firmly as one of the better first-liners in the league when it comes to putting the puck in the net. He ranked 30th in goals scored at season's end in the NHL. That's just flat-out impressive for a guy that, frankly, I don't see as that much of a talent when it comes to offensive production. They'll re-sign him for sure. I feel very confident about that. Hopefully staying away from the $7 million range, because as likely as it is that he stays with David Pastrnak next year, at least to start the year due to the chemistry they built, a repeat of this year, which saw over 1 out of every 5 shots he got on net going in, is unlikely, to put it simply. 22% shooting percentage, ranks second in the league among players with at least 35 games played. Geekie may be elite, but he is not Draisaitl. If he falls back to his usual 11 to 12% shooting percentage, he will sit somewhere between 15 and 20 goals scored. That's a range that you're very happy with in your middle six. You'd be happy with that. If it's on Pasternak's wing and he's got 15 to 20, not as happy. And I think you can be confident that he will keep his shooting percentage somewhere in the 15% range, thanks to Pasta's ability to find him with wide open chances, backdoor net, things of that nature. But I really doubt we're going to get another performance like this. This was, it's a career year for a reason. A lot went right through the back half of the year for him. Again, that's not taking anything away from him. His A+ is very well deserved. It's just, I see a lot of people with geeky opinions that don't take into account how absurd statistically this season really was for him. Great grade, great player, really happy to have him. Just might need to ease on the brakes a little bit with expectations for next year. 30 goals should not be the expectation, even if he's on Pasternak's wing. That's going to be really hard to repeat. So our next grade is a B+ at season's end for Justin Brazeau. He would end the year scoring nearly half a point per game in the bottom 6 through the Bruins' first 30 games. Felt like a real bright spot compared to the team's performance in general. The 20 games before the deadline, though, saw him with only 3 points and an easily moved contract. Was what the conversation kind of became at that point. The great explanation is kind of simple. We traded him at the deadline, but before that, he was a very serviceable third-line guy, bottom 6 guy that honestly had far more scoring potential than I gave him credit for going into the season. Because of his kind of lumbering process to get into the offensive zone, his forechecking isn't great, but if he does get a guy on a wall, he does well. I love his net front presence. The team didn't do enough of getting into the offensive zone and setting up for him to actually be valued in that way for us. But also, he was kind of just a found commodity, and then we were able to trade him for Jacob Lauko, a 22-year-old Khusnutdinov, and a 6th-rounder. That feels like excellent work by Sweeney, and maybe the B+, some of it is coming from the trade. But even with his struggles leading up to the deadline, I still think Brazeau largely outplayed my expectations, to the point where when we did mid-season grades, he was an A-. He had 19 points in 43 games played. Like, that was really, really good. And he was one of the only guys scoring on the power play. So, I don't know. Maybe I just didn't feel like bumping him that far down. B+ feels a little generous, but he really did outplay what my expectations were. The long-term outlook for Brazeau, he's on the Wild now, and he's playing like 8 minutes a night. Which kind of sounds about right. Have fun. All right. Our next grade goes to Mark Kastelic. He has a C+ at the mid-year mark, but he would actually get bumped up to a B- by the end of the year. He finishes the year at 5 goals, 9 assists, and 61 games played, 106 penalty minutes, which, had he stayed healthy, likely he would have led the league there over his teammate. Anyway, his nasty but responsible bottom 6 play warranted a contract extension. He got 3 more years as the de facto line driver of the 4th line, which I'm very, very comfortable with. He became a fan favorite rather quickly for the Bruins, and he deserves it. The grade explanation is pretty simple to me. In all likelihood, the grade is a little higher if he stays healthy, which isn't super fair, but he's plays a play style that his norm is not going to be super healthy. He's always going to be a little dinged up. He is a ferocious player. He takes way too many pims, and I get that, but he stands up for his guys in every scenario. He has strong defensive play, not afraid to block shots. You love that from a fourth-line pillar, and that's what they extended him for, to be a fourth-line pillar. His offense is limited, but he's shown flashes of getting to the front of the net and finishing from distance in the right scenarios. And on top of that, offensively, it's not like he had any help from his line mates outside of the just nuclear start to the year through the first 15 games. But other than that, it was really a slog to get into the offensive zone for the fourth line, which was largely unplayable when he was out. And then when he was in, was unplayable other than him. It was bad. That's not fair. I like Koepke too. We'll talk about Koepke shortly. But he's going to be a fixture on our fourth line. One that's exciting to watch for the nastiness, but I'd expect him to be on and off the injured list fairly frequently with his style. Hopefully he can stay healthy, but he went beyond my expectations. He became a real staple for that fourth line, and when he's out there, I have faith that something positive will happen, even if that's not always the case. Our next grade. So we were already down to the B minuses here. So this will be another B minus. It's Cole Koepke, who had a C plus again at the midseason mark, and again, he gets bumped up a little bit. He finishes the year with 10 goals, 7 assists, 17 points, and 73 games played. I think a lot of this grade comes from the fact that my expectations for Koepke were basically non-existent. I expected him to be a tweener, to maybe get some NHL games, not to play 73 of them, but it feels like he really came in and grabbed that roster spot and held on, and held on pretty effectively. He should be given the inside track to play the fourth line next year, I think. I know that fourth line barely did anything offensively through the second half of the year, but who's surprised by that? It's a fourth line on a bad team, that's not going to have a lot of freedom to do much. He is excellent defensively, though. Has a little scoring pop once in a while, and isn't afraid of the front of the net. I'm not sure he blew me away, but I am genuinely impressed by what he brought this year, and I think he fits the MO of a contending team's fourth liner. He'll be a 12th, 13th forward, but I think he's a good one at that. The long-term outlook is keeping him on that fourth left wing. Yeah, if he has to play higher in the lineup, which he had been asked to later in the season, I mean, he just can't fit it. He can't hack it out there, but that's fine. He's a fourth liner. I'm sure he's happy to be a fourth liner as long as he's in the league, right? We'll move on. We are coming out of the Bs, unfortunately. And now we're going to get to a player who was acquired at the deadline and won't have any mid-season grades or anything for him. But Khusnutdinov is going to end the year with a C+. He had 3 goals, 2 assists, and 18 games played, largely in the first few games were those points. But like all the trade deadline acquisitions, I think it's important to bring up the whole new system, new team, while the season is crumbling away and he gets iced with everybody. And we're mostly icing fourth liners and AHL guys at this point. So a lot of grace to be given here. But Khusnutdinov also had to deal with new line mates consistently. I mean, he's bouncing up and down the lineup when he comes in and not getting a ton of time to get familiar with his co-workers. He's 22. He showed flashes of offensive pop and transition skill enough to get me just a little hopeful that he may be something. I find it interesting when people talk about Khusnutdinov because I'll hear them talk about his season, his expectations, things of that nature, and they act like their expectations were that he was going to be a scoring threat, third line, blah, blah, blah. No. Your expectations of him after 10 days of him being on the Bruins were for him to be that. Your expectations when we acquired him were probably one of 3 things. One, you were super familiar with the prospect for some reason, and you had a real set of expectations for what his ceiling would be, which might be middle six guy. I don't know. 2, you have no idea who the guy is. You couldn't possibly have expectations. Or 3, you built expectations based off of what we had to give up to get him. Now, I was number 3. Not super familiar with him, but I still form expectations too quickly to just be like, oh, I've got nothing here. When we acquired him for Justin Brazeau, and we also got Lauko and a 6th rounder back, my expectations were like, oh, this is a guy who might not be an NHLer, right? That's what my expectations were. very quickly, I launched into, oh my gosh, could this guy be a real thing? And then they fell back down over the last 10 or so games where he disappeared for large stretches of them, although still flashed some talent. So I think he exceeded my expectations a bit, but by the end of the year, he was back down to fourth, third line, wasn't getting a ton of ice time. There's no like solid thing to lean on here for a high grade, right? He did exceed expectations by a small margin. He's getting a C+. Awesome. Good for him. The long-term outlook here is there's no guarantee he makes the squad out of camp next year, but he's got a shot, and that's, I mean, really all you can ask for, especially after having fallen out of favor in your previous team, which clearly he had. Justin Brazeau isn't some crazy talent, so if you're just chucking in a 22-year-old prospect in that trade, the Wild weren't going to do much with him. It would be really nice if he becomes a scoring threat in the third line. I am hoping that that's what he can become, but that's where I'm at, C+. Another C+, Parker Wotherspoon, who had a C+ at the mid-year rank, and he'll have a C+ again at the end of the year. He had a goal and 6 assists in 55 games played with a -10+-. Not that I really care about that stat all that much. The great explanation is fairly simple. A 7th defenseman who oftentimes looks like a 7th defenseman who's frequently being asked to move higher in the lineup out of necessity on that left side. Again, no reason to get complicated here. He's been fine, and he gets the plus for being asked to do more than he can really handle. Oh wait, that's exactly what I said at the mid-season point. Nothing changed. Honestly, no idea if he gets re-signed or not. I'm praying Jokiharju doesn't, so I guess I'm hoping Wotherspoon does. But we don't have a lot of options on the back end and before free agency. And we currently have 4 NHL defensemen under contract for next season. Lohrei will be re-signed, making it 5. We don't have a prospect that appears ready for the next step. We are very likely signing a defenseman this offseason. So if Wotherspoon wants to stay, I'm guessing they'll keep him for cheap. And if he finds a better option elsewhere, then so be it. The goal this offseason would be to make sure we don't need him in our starting lineup, but he's a good 7th defenseman. And I'm very happy with what he's done. He's been better than I expected by just a little bit, and he's also to play far more and far higher in the lineup at times than should have ever been expected from him. So we need to make sure we don't have to rely on him night in, night out, but I mean, definitely a guy who's been a good soldier for the team. A C+ feels really fair there. We've got a bunch of quick ones coming up here. We've got a C+, a C, and another C. So Vinny Lettieri is our C+. 3 goals, 2 assists, and 26 games played. He gets a plus, and maybe this is over-complimentary, but he was supposed to be really nothing in my mind. But when he played, he was very consistent. He was a bottom 6 guy who made things interesting at the net front. Not a lot of scoring upside, but just one of those guys that felt like he was in the right position, responsible, doing what he was supposed to be doing whenever he was in the lineup. He's a 13th forward at best, but I see no reason why he would be a C or lower at that point. I mean, he did his job. He did his job well when he did get called upon. 26 games played is way more than I expected from him. And yeah, there's other reasons for that, but I thought he was good. I really did. For what I expected from him, I thought he was good. Lauko ends up being a C. We knew exactly what he was. He's a high-energy, fast skater, little scoring pop once in a while, but he's ferocious on the boards, isn't a fan of backing down to anyone. I know a C sometimes sounds like a bad grade, but he's just exactly what we know him to be. He's a C. That's it. My expectation long-term is he should be another staple on that 4th line if he can stay healthy. It'll be interesting to see if that group of Bruins fans that insisted he was better than a 4th-line guy resurfaces. That'll be neat. But no, for the most part, I mean, he should be a 13th forward. I think that Koepke, Kastelic, and Lauko will be a likely lineup, but if there's other guys that play there, they're going to get called on when they're banged up and just cycle through. That's just more normal Lauko stuff. Our other C is Mark Mclaughlin. 2 goals in 12 games. He's a 13th forward on the best nights. No reason to get all crazy here. He was a 13th forward with us. I just bring him up because people really love this kid. I said at the midseason, probably doesn't have a future with the team, likely a tweener from AHL to NHL. I feel exactly the same right now. He's also on the Devils now, so good for him. We'll move on to another C. Wow, there's a lot of Cs. Jonas Korpisalo. ends the season with 27 games played, an .893 save percentage, and a 2.9 goals allowed average. I expected a subpar backup, and we got a subpar backup. But I don't want to diminish a few stretches of the season where he was solid. Not only was he solid, but he was outperforming our starting goaltender, which is damning by faint praise, but pretty much right in line with expectations. Some will want the grade to be higher, I get that, but remember, if Swayman had played anywhere near expectations, games that Korpisalo started would have felt far, far, far more frustrating. They would have. Or most of them. I don't want to say all of them, because he really did have some dandies in there. The long-term outlook here is actually kind of complicated, because now there is supposed discourse about his playing time, and he isn't happy, and no goalie's happy when they play less than 30 games. He was statistically one of the worst goaltenders in the league in 2023, got traded with retainment, and now after a season of sub-895 save percentage play, he wants more action? I understand he's competitive. I understand that he's an athlete. I understand that he's a professional and he wants to play. I also understand that there are moments where he was the best goaltender on the team. But brother, you are closer to falling out of the league than you are to successfully making demands. Trading him is difficult with his performance and contract, but it's certainly something being thrown around. And if this is going to become some sort of circus with him being upset about his playing time while performing the way he is, get him out. And honestly, if Swayman doesn't have a much better year next year, this is going to be a similar conversation. No, I know that the goaltending has been bad. I know that the starting goaltender who had way too many games when he was performing so poorly, I get all of that. But I'm not ready to listen to either Korpisalo or Swayman make any sort of demand after what we watched for a full season. The goaltending was bad. The defense in front of him, really bad. But the goaltending was also bad. So he gets a C, because I expected him to not be good. He also wasn't atrocious, though. Honestly, maybe he could have been given a C+, because maybe I expected even worse. Maybe I did. We're going to leave it where it's at, though. We're fine. We're moving into the C-. We're starting to get down there. Andrew Peeke is our first C-. 1 goal, 16 assists, and 76 games played, a -10. The team was such a mess that Peeke really didn't come up as the issue all that often. And I actually want to compliment him with this, because I think that's more because the issues were so glaring. But he's really good defensively at 5-on-5. He really is. 5-on-5, even strength play, he was really solid. His breakouts aren't very clean, and there's mistakes that get made, but as far as it goes, as a third-pairing defenseman, or ideally a third-pairing defenseman, he was fine. But that's it. The 5-on-5 defense is all we're really getting there, which isn't a bad thing for a third-pairing defenseman, but it's also not something that's going to get you a great grade. He had a significantly negative impact on the penalty kill, and his breakouts and ability to help in transition are very limited. That's what we watched all year. A lot of people, I feel like, really were happy with Peake's whole performance this year because they really didn't watch him much. In most games, there were bigger issues that people were focusing on. You wouldn't walk out of a game being like, God, Peeke was a disaster. He had a few of those, but not nearly as many as some of the other people on this list. So I think he kind of hid in the shadow of a lot of people. But going back, I've watched a lot of his shifts again. I've watched a lot of his plays, and I just went, yeah, the guy's not... He definitely didn't go above expectations. In fact, I think he's just a little below them. I originally put his grade in the D range, but I felt that wasn't fair considering I gave other players bumps for playing higher in the lineup than they should be. So I should also put him in that same category. He did have to play a lot of moments as a second pairing guy, and he was outmatched. He's a replacement level defenseman, and though the contract isn't his fault, Sweeney giving up a third-round pick to get this guy remains one of the weirder trades of his tenure. I really don't super understand that. The long-term outlook here is I believe the Bruins are pushing hard for a second-pairing right-handed defenseman, obviously with the loss of Carlo, or the exit of Carlo, I should say, so that they could get him back in a third-pairing shutdown role consistently, especially with Carlo gone. If he's required to be a second-pairing guy next year, he's going to get talked about a lot more, especially if the team's other issues are being cleaned up. If he's playing a sheltered third-pairing role, then that's fine, but anything more than that, and his minutes are going to be noticeable. And I honestly would really prioritize getting him off of the penalty kill outside of like a third unit penalty kill or something like that, because he's just not effective at clearing out the front of the net, and his stick work isn't good enough to prevent those in tight chances. I think he's a big part of why that penalty kill is as bad as it is. I think a lot of the players are part of it, especially the goaltending, but yeah, I think a C- works well for me for Peeke. He gets a little grace because he's playing above his station, but I have a weird time accepting how many people really like Peeke. I guess I'm a little negative there. I mean, this video is just going to get more and more negative with these grades, unfortunately, but this is just what comes from a bad season. Another C-, Jordan Oesterle. Now, this is fine, right? He had 6 points in 22 games played. He was a -3. In a year where the defense was ransacked from injuries, he was asked to play top 4 minutes early in the year, and honestly, had some solid games. And then some really not solid games. His season with the Bruins would end when he was waived and picked up by Nashville. I'm not going to ding him too much. He was asked to do something he wasn't expected to. He was always going to be a 7th defenseman at best in my mind. And, I mean, many of our defensemen had to play higher in the lineup than they were supposed to. But in a season that players got extended runs at higher positions because of how dire the roster situation was, he still couldn't seem to hang and string together positive games. So, C-, not digging him that hard, but definitely not meeting expectations or above expectations. Good luck in Nashville, though. Casey Mittelstadt, another C-. I not a Mittelstadt guy. Really messed around with the idea of an F, but there was no reason to give him an F. Why would I? That'd be ridiculous. He had 4 goals, 2 assists in 18 games played. He was a whopping -17 ± in 18 games played with us. It's actually kind of crazy. It's pretty close to expectations, though. Not the ±, and it's also a bad stat, so I'm leaving that alone. But I'm not a huge Mittelstadt guy, so I didn't have high expectations, and nothing from the end of the season really changed my mind on this. I think he can be a decent third-line center, but it feels like we have a lot of options for that, who cost a lot less than $5.75 million a year. The ± is gross, but I want to give some grace because I hate that stat. And also, he comes into a new team and a new system that is actively plummeting down the standings, blah, blah. All the guys who came in at the deadline get this same kind of spiel. The long-term outlook is I assume he will look better next year when he has some time to learn the system, create chemistry, all that good stuff. But still not so much that I'm excited about his spot on the team. I wouldn't hold on too much hope that he's a long-term 2C option, though he likely starts there next year. I think they're going to try to give him a run there. I think there's a lot of fans that have a lot of hope about this guy in his mid-20s coming over. It's kind of clear to me at this point that in the Coyle trade that saw us get Mittelstadt, that saw us get Will Zellers, that saw us get a really good pick, I think Mittelstadt had to come back. I mean, I haven't looked at the cap, so there's probably some cap reasons for that too, but I think they also were like, we don't want to be tied into this contract anymore. We don't like this player that much. Get him out of here. And that was part of it, and why we got a prospect who just won player of the year in his league. Even though there's plenty of scouts that say, oh, he won't be translating that to the next level and all that. Whatever. Will Zellers, still a name to watch for us. But with that trade, I think the trade details got better by taking back Mittelstadt fully. I'm just not a big Mittelstadt guy, and I didn't see anything that really changed my mind about that. But I can't give him a D or an F because he's coming into an absolute shit show when he comes in, and he performed well enough. You know, he fought the good fight. As we go further, we're back to the C- once again. Brandon Carlo, who actually at the midseason mark had a D+, but I felt that through the remaining games he would play with the Bruins, he did improve. He really did improve. He was starting to rebound over this past couple of weeks into late December, early January. He had a couple stinkers again in January and then started to pick it back up. And then the trade happens and everything like that. So he had 1 goal, 8 assists in 63 games played. He was a +2. He was traded to Toronto for Fraser Minten, a 4th and a 1st. His grade went up just a titch from the midseason video. But like many other players, not much change from that point of the season on. He did improve defensively, in my opinion, though still had some struggles. The fair way to talk about his season is he started his shifts in the defensive zone more than anywhere else on the ice and more than any other Bruin. He was consistently tasked with the harder matchups and had a rotating door for partners. He struggled. He was part of the problem defensively on many nights and part of the problem on the penalty kill on many nights. But the upward trajectory was there as the season went on. He didn't meet expectations, but he was closer than most on the Bs this year. He was working his way there. So that's why we get to the C- rather than the D range. Long-term outlook, obviously in Toronto. He'll be a scapegoat in Toronto when things go wrong. As we know, his mistakes are glaring and his successes are quiet. But I think he's going to help them compete at a higher level. They're about to get mowed down by a Panthers team that was even better than we thought going into the playoffs. So have fun with that. Stay healthy, Carlo. We flat out know that the Panthers are going to be headhunting Carlo. They're going to be looking for another concussion. Like, that's their MO there. But yeah, just stay healthy out there, bud. It's a tough series to be a part of. I'm actually genuinely glad I don't have to watch the Bruins play the Panthers anymore this year. The next, C- again. A lot of C-. But this one's weird. This one's really weird. In fact, there are 2 C- in a row that I am shocked we got back to the C range for them. Elias Lindholm is our first one. At the midseason point, he was a D. And he was a D graciously. Right? Graciously. 7 goals, 14 assists in 45 games played at the midseason mark. A 38-point pace. Tied for 3rd in the team scoring at that point, which is rough. He had a 54.6% face-off win percentage at the midseason. And that still, even with that, he was just abhorrent. It was a disaster to start the year. So let's get to year's end here. He finishes the year with 17 goals, 30 assists, tied 3rd on the team in scoring, 55% from the dot. Really, really good. And the great explanation, my first statement was this is a tricky one, right? The first 5 months of the season were abysmal. He was winning faceoffs, but he was a defensive liability, which is not what his game was typically built off of. He had no offensive ability whatsoever, and whether he was placed with Pastrnak or Koepke, he looked as lost as could be. My expectations for him were lower than maybe any other Bruins fan out there, and he still wasn't meeting them. Here's the good news. We find out at the end of the season that he had a back injury in August, and he had been playing through the entirety of the year, which isn't good news, obviously, but it turns into good news because he was beginning to feel better towards the end of the year. And since March 1st, on a team that won 6 of their remaining 22 games, he had 6 goals, all even strength, 10 assists, 8 of them even strength, 0 penalty minutes, won over 57% of his faceoffs, and carried a reasonable 13.3% shooting percentage. That's over 7 weeks of play, and a full season of that would have put him soundly as a second-line center who is a frustrating matchup for top lines, freeing Pasternak's lineup to go against weaker competition. The injury, mixed with the final 2 months of the year, is enough for me to bump him up to the almost meeting expectations for me. The minus, the C-, the minus is because I can't fully ignore the first 5 months of the season, where he was a huge part of the problem with this team. Now again, new team, new system, takes time. But I needed a glimmer of hope that this contract wouldn't be as bad as it looked. Because at the mid-season point, we were hoping that he could look like a 3rd-line center. That's how bad it was. And that's not even like hyperbolic. That's legitimately, it was that bad that we thought he was a bad 3rd C. Not okay. But he gave us hope. He had a really nice last 2 months of the season. One that could at least make us confident that no, he's not the 1C. We knew he wasn't the 1C. We knew the entire time he wasn't the 1C for David Pastrnak. Sweeney really tried to sell people on that, and some people believed it, some people didn't. But he's not. But if he could be a really good 2C, or just a good 2C, I'm super in. I would be just so happy with him as a player. I would adore it if next year Elias makes me look like an absolute donkey for hating that contract when it was signed. And if he looks excellent at 2C, oh, at least he gave us some hope. At least he did. So C-, way higher grade than I thought he would end up with. But genuinely, that's between me giving him a little grace with the injury, little grace with a new team, and having the last 2 months that he did. Yeah. I mean, he got close. And again, a C for me going into the year, a C would have been like, he's like between a second and third line center. So a C- isn't like, oh man, he's almost a 2C. You know, so it's still not that great. I know my expectations of him were rather low. And his partner in crime, though, Nikita Zadorov, the other C-. Now, this one is for a lot of reasons, though. At the midseason mark, I had him as a D-. 2 goals, 8 assists in 45 games played, 18-point pace. Didn't really care about that. Somehow a +6 in +-. He would continue to have a good +- through the season. He had 82 PIMs midway through the season, 82 penalty minutes. Woof. And at the time, I wrote, I'll just read it out to you, an absolute disaster of a contract. You know how I said the whole, my expectations were low, but holy hell with Lindholm? My expectations for Zadorov were even lower, but holy hell. He takes 1 billion penalties, which we knew when we signed him. He's not an effective defender despite his size and reach. He makes baffling decisions frequently, usually resulting in him coasting through the defensive zone while the opponent sets up for the easiest net front chance of their life. He actually starts in the offensive zone just about as often as he starts in the D zone, so it's not like you can point to the difficulty of his matchups, which he's usually not taking the more difficult assignments. He skates well and has a nice shot. I have been told that he skates the puck out of danger well and is an effective puck clearer, but I haven't seen that. My expectations were low. They should have been lower. Bad, right? Gosh, that's bad. That's really bad. But end of the year grade, C-. He had 4 goals, 18 assists in 81 games played, led the league in penalty minutes, and no, not because he fights. He did catch Sam Bennett clean through the skull in a fight, though, so that's an instant grade boost. That's literally part of the grade boost. Like, that one thing is literally part of this boost. And I don't think a single Bruins fan out there goes, that's ridiculous. No, I think every single one of you agrees with me. But the great explanation is a lot that goes into it. The expectation for me was an overpriced third pairing defenseman. Through the first 2/3 of the season, it looked way worse than that. It was a third pairing defenseman who, granted, was playing far above his station in the lineup, but who was an active liability on the ice. Don't give me the + - nonsense either. The reason I hate that stat is because of how many variables go into it. And no Bruin benefited more from empty net points than Zadorov, and it's by a huge margin. If you actually break down where all of his + - came from, he was negative midway through the season, like on 5-on-5. It's actually kind of interesting. Natural stat trick, you can kind of go page to page and look at the different areas of where his + - actually came from. That being said, quick compliment to him. He was something ridiculous, like +14 or something like that on this team with an empty net situation, the opponent having an empty net. As much as I'm like, you can't use that and be like, look at his + - when he's out there and players are getting empty net goals and he's benefiting and + - from it. But it is a compliment because if he is the type of player that you can put out with 1.5 minutes left in a game that you're up by 1, and he effectively helps kill that off and like keep the win, worth its weight in gold, right? Absolutely. I just think + - has way too many variables for you just to point at it, especially when I've watched every shift he took this year and was disappointed through 80% of them. He was an active liability, constantly caught out of plays, behind in transition defense. The big hits were nice, but not when they gives up high danger chances against every single time. He was flat out, objectively bad for 60 games. With a couple bright spots in there, of course, but for the bulk of 60 games, it was bad. And then for about 2 months, he wasn't. In fact, he wasn't decent. He wasn't fine. He wasn't okay. He was damn good. He was damn good for the last couple months while the team was losing a bunch of games. So I don't know how we take that into account. But he stopped chasing plays to the wall away from the net. He displayed stronger gap control on transition defense, no longer drifting to the strong side that he kept doing. His big hits and offensive pinches were both cleaner and better timed. He focused more on clearing out the net front, and his outlet passes were tape to tape and effective. All while the team around him was melting down. He became not only a bright spot on the ice, but in the locker room as well. actively pursuing conversations about leadership and not accepting losses as the norm, vocally calling out the locker room as a whole to be better, and even having a few controversial comments about the poor goaltending, which, to his point, was shit. He quickly stepped in as a leader. I mean, really did. A voice that wouldn't believe defeat was the expected outcome. And that's what you need. You can't let that seep in as like, this is just another day, another loss. You can't let that seep in. He also punched Sam Bennett in the face. That's just awesome. Yeah. Look, it's not enough for me to give him a C and say he met expectations this year. Because even though my expectations for him were so low, and he did have 2 months where he did exceed them, the season was basically over at that point. The season had been lost at that point. The first 5 months were brutal. They were brutal. They were so very bad. And so that's why I think a C- shows a great jump in his grade. And shows that I'm really excited about the potential that he can keep this up. I really, really am. That first 4 months, 5 months was so bad. If I was just grading the last 2 months, it's probably a B plus. And part of that is how low my expectations were, and part of it is just how damn good he looked for a lot of it. And he punched Sam Bennett in the face. So, the long-term outlook here. I'm genuinely and earnestly and honestly holding out hope that, like Elias, he performs at a level next year that completely changes my tone about him. I am comfortable with an effective third-pairing defenseman who is overpaid. The money's already spent. The tears would be falling into the void to continue complaining about it. I'm going to continue to complain about it, but it's fine. But if he can have the sort of impact we saw over the last month and a half, 2 months, then he becomes a player that I will really like having on this team. It's particularly off the ice. I'm not the kind of guy who wants to be right more than he wants to be honest. I hated that signing. I hated it with every depth of my being. I felt the hate in my cockles. But I would love to be the idiot here. I would love it. And I will absolutely admit it when the time comes. Because the last 2 months, yeah, a lot to hope. A lot to hope about that. And that's what we need for next season anyway, right? Is hope. Let's move on. Charlie Coyle is our next grade. It's not a C- though. It's a D+. The trade that he was involved in is an A+. But that's a Sweeney grade, not a Coyle grade. He had 15 goals, 7 assists, and 64 games played, traded for Will Zellers, USHL Player of the Year, Mittelstadt, and a second rounder. Do I give him credit for the trade? I mean, no, right? It's an A+ trade. A younger prospect who, even though most scouts don't think he'll translate to higher levels, is the best player in his league. A young third-line center who I don't really love. And a pick, a second rounder. No, we don't give him credit for anything like that, unfortunately. And honestly, shooting percentage aside, him being on pace for 20 goals while spending a ton of time with poor-performing centers and wingers, depending on how he was deployed, could be worse. It could be worse. It could be worse. And it was enough to get us a return that we were happy with. But he was a liability defensively for much of the year, which feels unusual for him. And his possession game had completely disappeared this season. He was as much part of the problem earlier this season as basically anyone else. And I am a big Coyle defender. I'm patient with Coyle. I know his game is like that. The stretches where it's just very, almost invisible. And then he has some really great games. And we just weren't getting the great games. And we spent way too much time talking about what's wrong with Coyle for this to be a positive grade in any way. Hey, look, long-term outlook, I'd rather be on Colorado too, brother. Good for you. But just not a good season for him. Not a good season. I think he'd be the first one to admit that as well. So we'll move on from there. But D+ feels a little harsh, but also feels pretty accurate. Another D+, Fabian Lysell. 1 goal, 2 assists in 12 games played. It's a tough grade. We did this with Poitras. We're getting to Poitras too, unfortunately. We're getting to Poitras too. This is a tough grade to give because I expected him to force his way into the lineup this year. But between injuries and the front office seemingly determined not to bring up any offensive help through the season, he only got a look late in the year when things were at their worst. His skating is beautiful. He averages over 3 shot attempts per game, but only about half of those are making it to the net. He was driving the center of the ice and was excellent in transition, both defensively and offensively. He didn't meet expectations, though. Whether that's his fault or not, he didn't meet them. And optimism is there for a better season next year. But he couldn't... I think the big part of this grade is he didn't force his way into the lineup. He was given a look later in the season when the season was over. I do believe he should have made the team out of camp. I do believe there are pockets of the season where he should have been called up. It's not an F. It's not. Because I think there was some unfair play here. Not intentionally. Not intentionally. No one's sabotaging the kid. But I kind of thought that he would force his way in. And it didn't work out for a myriad of reasons. D+. The long-term outlook here is there are way too many attributes that he has that I love to think that he won't pan out in the NHL in some way, right? That doesn't mean he has to be a true top 6 scoring threat or facilitator or anything like that. But I just believe that there's really something there. I really do. And I think he can be an effective second-line winger. More of a facilitator, which is we have a lot of guys who are more of facilitators than goal scorers, which is starting to get a little scary there. But I really like Lysell, and next year is a huge year for him, and he does need to make the team out of camp. He really does. Moving on, another D, or actually this is just a D. This isn't a D+. Brad Marchand. Now, we were at mid-season giving him a D+, and his grade went down. Coming off of 3 surgeries. How dare I? How dare I? But there's a few things that came into play here. So at the season's end, for us, 21 goals, 26 assists in 61 games played. And it's a really difficult grade to give because there are so many factors here. His on-ice play was subpar for him, but it's not like he had any consistent help. I didn't like his leadership tactics. I didn't think he played a large role in younger players not getting opportunities. He himself admitted he forgot what it was like to be the new guy on the team and maybe didn't approach the free agents and prospects the right way. The team had huge stretches where they would flat out give up on games while he was, acting captain. And again, there's plenty of blame to go around all over there, but there is some leadership stuff there. The trade deadline comes, and there's all this discourse about the trade, which, again, wasn't a good one. But more and more, it seems like the Bruins were doing him a favor after he declined what was a more than generous extension offer. There are a lot of different reports about it. I'm not going to start listing them off because they're all rumors. But if you buy into the smoke and fire idea that where there's smoke, there must be fire, there's a lot of talk about a extension in the $6 million range that he would not take. I don't get it. I will always be a Marchand fan. But this season was a sour taste in a lot of ways when it comes to the Rat King. And just like at the midseason grade, he's getting dinged for things that are beyond his play. And maybe even not fully his fault. But that's the life of a leader. There are going to be certain things where, hey, your team's not performing well. That falls on you. And I genuinely didn't like a lot of his comments about the prospects. You got to earn it. You got to earn it, especially after they'd have, a really good game or they're doing well in the AHL. And it seems like he's always pushing back on the idea that they belong on the ice at the NHL level. And there just wasn't a lot of positives to go along with it. I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. But a D feels just about right. He definitely performed under expectations, even with the surgeries, even with the health stuff. The whole team did. But the attitude of the team was piss poor for a lot of the season. The year starting with McAvoy talking about, well, you don't win the cup in October. Yeah, you're still going to win some games, man. Just a bad look in a lot of ways here. And again, that's McAvoy's comments, but just the mindset of the team seemed really bad for a lot of this, and I'm digging Marchand a little bit for it. I really am. The long-term outlook here is the Panthers look like a near lock to represent the East once again in the finals, and he's been a part of that. Bruins fans will hope they make it one more round for the conditional first-round draft pick to come to fruition. But the fan base seems split on whether they want the Panthers to go all the way. Some are just all pro Marchand, and some are screw the Panthers. Also, I'm going to say this once. I'll probably repeat it a bunch of times, actually, but I don't want Marchand to re-sign in the summer. I know that's nasty and a bummer. I'm really ready to start focusing on a non-2011 core. And Marchand was the last guy standing from that, really. But I'm just ready to stop talking about it and look at the future. And I think Marchand kind of forces them to defer to him almost. Like, he's the guy in the room. He's done it. He's been there. I'm just ready for the next wave of Bruins hockey. I think I am. And I know there's pain coming with that. I know he would be a good addition to our team on ice and off ice. But I'm ready to move on. And I think that's just where my heart sits at this point. That was a long time on Marchand. That was a long time. Let's talk another really easy one. Henry Jokiharju. That's another D for me. 4 assists in 18 games played. There's a million excuses. Team was icing largely in the AHL squad at this point. He's new on a team, new systems, yada, yada, yada. I don't like Jokiharju. He's not an effective defenseman. I've watched him for years, and I am never impressed. Even in a third pairing sheltered role, he's still a guy that makes you nervous, especially in a playoff series, because every time he's on the ice, they're hunting him. Look, long-term outlook is we don't have a lot of options on that right side, so maybe he gets re-signed, but if it's for anything above 7th defenseman money, it's a bad idea. You can find a replacement level guy. Like, do not do this. Do not do this. Do not do this. He's the guy you hunt in a playoff series. Don't do this. Ugh. I don't know. I really didn't like his play. I'm not a Jokiharju fan. I don't see the benefit of bringing him back. Let's leave it where it is. We'll move on. Matthew Poitras. Once again a D. He was a D at midseason. He was a D now. And largely for the same reasons. And a lot of people complained about this. And I understand. I don't even think those people are wrong. We just look at it in 2 different ways. Because this grade, frankly, not very fair. He had 1 goal, 10 assists, and 33 games played, which my expectations point scoring-wise weren't that high anyway. But I expected him to push for a lineup spot and stick, most likely at 3C. That didn't happen. He couldn't stick. And whether that was his fault or not, that's what happened. Eventually, they felt it was better to leave him in the AHL for growth. That's classic not meeting expectation stuff right there. Now, the deeper you dig into it, the clearer it becomes that he was A, snake bitten, like really snake bitten, with a shooting percentage sub 4%, and line mates who couldn't finish a scoring chance for the life of them, so snake bitten both ways. B, he was genuinely affected by the weird approach coaching and front office was taking to this season, as even when struggling, he was offering more on-ice impact than players they were replacing him with. So, I mean, I think he was struggling to really get a mental look at what he was and wasn't supposed to be. A lot of mixed messages from coaching and front office, I felt. And C, he could really benefit from his time in the AHL. Of course he could. He's been crushing it down there for most of this season. His confidence should be really good. Him and Lot Mellis have immediately created some nice chemistry. But he didn't meet expectations. He's 21 years old. His expectations are still fluctuating a lot. So my expectations were a roster spot that he would stick in this year. He failed to meet those. If you want to say those expectations were too high, absolutely. Push your own grade down there. Totally get it. Personally, my expectation was him to come into a year where this team needed help and to just basically do what he did the year before, which is force them to keep him in the lineup. And he wasn't able to do that. The long-term outlook here is he still projects as a really good 3C in my mind. He has some 2C upside. Anyone referring to a 21-year-old who has forced his way into the lineup multiple times without a first-round pedigree as a bust is exposing themselves as a little silly. Right? Plenty of things to be hopeful with Poitras. Very excited to see him play again. But it was a bad year. It was a bad year for him NHL-wise. And I think his expectations were to play in the NHL the whole year. And he didn't get to do that. And again, maybe not fully his fault, but I mean, he's part of the equation. So I'm going with D. Another D grade is Pavel Zacha. I don't know. This feels weird. 14 goals and 33 assists for 47 points, tied for third on the team. No forward spent more time with Geekie and Pastrnak than Zacha. I know he isn't a 1C, but he was given every opportunity to be an impactful player working with the best options the Bruins had, which, granted, Pastrnak, obviously incredible, but clearly takes a specific type of player to play with him and be effective. Not that he doesn't elevate everyone around him, but like truly to hit that level with him, you got to be a special kind of guy. And Geekie, who is, I mean, just depending on who you ask, elite or maybe not so elite. But he was given those opportunities with the 30 goal scorer and the 106 point getter. And he was a ghost at 5-on-5 for huge stretches of the year. He was a prominent part of a terrible power play and a bad penalty kill. He's far from our biggest issue this year and was asked to go against competition that was frankly above his station, a conversation we've had about many of these players. But simply, he did not meet the moment, and he did not meet expectations. Players like Zacha are the ones that make me second guess the grading, though, because if everyone's been bad, shouldn't there be more of a curve for these grades? But, I mean, everyone being bad just means everyone gets bad grades. Like, that's where I'm at with this at this point. Great season for faceoffs, though, for him. He had 53% win rate. That's really solid for him. But, yeah, just didn't meet expectations. I expect him to be involved in a lot of trade rumors this summer, but I haven't. I have a hard time believing that they're going to move off of him with the current state of our top six. I think they prefer to have the versatility that he brings and see how it goes from there. Our next grouping, oh my goodness, we have a whole grouping of Fs. I hate these grades. I hate these so much. But your first F is John Beecher, who had a C- at the midseason point. At the midseason, he had 2 goals, 6 assists through 43 games played, a 16-point pace, 0 plus minus. My expectations, a little different, I think, than a lot of people, because I've watched him for going on 6 years now, something like that. And I've watched him be ineffective offensively. Every stage of it. Every stage of it. I've watched him fall down lineups where he's played. I mean, he typically athletically is so gifted that they put him on the second line. And then he can't hack it. And then he gets pushed. And he gets pushed. And he gets pushed out of the lineup. And he would finish this year with 3 goals, 8 assists, and 78 games played. And he would get scratched at the end of the year to give other guys a taste of the NHL. But it got bad. The expectations were low, and it still got bad. He still wins more faceoffs than he loses. His defensive game is still okay, but I mean, there just isn't enough there. To the point that when the trade deadline passes and there's opportunity all over the lineup to move up and make an impact, he was offered less and less ice time until he was eventually scratched. This grade is as much about how the front office is looking at him as his on-ice play. He couldn't stay in the lineup. I mean, that's just an absolute... I know he only got scratched for a handful of games at the end of the year, but he was a ghost for most of the year. Most of the year, the line that he was on, no matter what line that was unplayable in games and would get caved in. And he was a common denominator for that. Honestly, at this point, I'm questioning whether they qualify his RFA or not. Like, he might literally no longer be on the team next year, and he's only 24. That's how much he's fallen out of favor with this franchise. I'm not sure where that ends, but this has just been... His reputation with the team has just continued to decline. And maybe that's really where this F comes from, is he's just getting worse in the eyes of the front office. He needs a reset, and I don't know how he finds it, but not a good year for him. Another F, very easy one here, Trent Frederic, just an abysmal season. 8 goals, 7 assists, and 57 games played. He got traded to Edmonton for a second, fourth, and Max Wayner. And look, it was an awful year, no matter how you look at it. He stalled in every facet. His offensive game was non-existent. He wasn't being physical. He didn't find space at the net front. He wasn't responsible defensively. Or he was okay defensively, I should say, but nothing impressive. The path had one clear conclusion. It was a change of scenery. I mean, good luck in Edmonton. Really rooting for you. Like the guy. Really hope the player succeeds, but I don't see how you give Trent Frederic anything but an F. An awful year for him. Just an awful year. Didn't even look like he wanted to be there most of the time at a certain point. Our next F, unfortunately, is Mason Lohrei, which seems so unbelievably harsh, man. So harsh. It's technically his rookie season. 5 goals, 28 assists, and 77 games played. That's good. I mean, I'll certainly take that. League low, minus 43 plus minus. Now, I don't like the plus minus stat. Being the worst in the league, though, is a little bad. Oh, my note is read previous grade explanation. All right, let's see what I said at the midseason mark. At the midseason, he had 2 goals, 17 assists, and 40 games played. Second leading scorer for our defenseman, a team worst -15 goal differential. The great explanation at the time was so a lot going into this one. He's got a nice point total. That's good, but he's fallen short in way too many other areas. Remember, I'm grading on this season, not his potential, which I still believe is very high. He's been an abject disaster defensively. He's on the ice for a ton of goals against and is all too commonly putting his D pair in poor situations. There was a huge opportunity when Hampus went down to play higher in the lineup. He hasn't played well enough to stick, oftentimes muting McAvoy's game as he tries to cover for Lohrei when they are paired. He also had the opportunity to jump on the top power play unit, but again, his situational awareness and attempts at doing too much backfire too often to give him the role. I am very high on Lohrei and think he's going to be an excellent defenseman, but in a season where he has been given the opportunity to succeed in several areas, he has fallen well short. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Yeah. A lot of one step forward, two steps back for Lohrei this year. It's been a tough one. And the long-term outlook is still, I'm very high on him. Look at this disaster of a year, but I still feel his ceiling is exciting. There needs to be a lot of growth defensively. You can be a subpar defenseman who is excellent offensively, but right now he's a terrible defensive and who is good offensively. Lots of growth to be done. I do have faith. He's flashed those talents before. The Bruins are in desperate need of him improving because the defensive core is so bleak. But yeah, I'm going to have faith. But look, just because you fail once doesn't mean you fail forever, but this is a failed season. And then the big one, the final one, the Mac Daddy F. The I want to set the goaltending market. The I'm holding out because I know what I'm worth. Look, I'm a Jeremy Swayman fan. I want to say that right now. Right now, I want to say I'm a Jeremy Swayman fan. And I believe that contract's going to work out just fine. Just fine. I think he's going to be good. I really do. I really do believe that. Well, at the end of the year, he had an .892 save percentage, 3.11 goals allowed average in 58 games played. This one also asked me to read the grade explanation from mid-season. And that says, how can the grade be anything else? The last few starts have been far better. He did have a little stretch there where he was improving. And I don't expect this grade to stick at season's end. The grade was an F then as well. He ranks near the bottom in pretty much every statistic for starting goaltenders. Not only has this season been far below his standard, but far below his contract standard. When he talked about setting the market, I don't think he meant to set it back 10 years. Aren't I so fun? Gosh, aren't I fun? Well, the grade stuck. The grade stuck till the season's end. Just an awful year for the young netminder. So bad, in fact, that the rumors of teams trying to buy low on him are surfacing, trying to pry him away from Boston. So bad that the front office at the end of the year repeatedly spoke about how bad the goaltending was after it was expected to be one of our strengths. It was so bad that he ranks 4th to last in save percentage among goaltenders who started at least half of their team's games. So bad that this will become a cautionary tale for signing young, promising goaltenders with limited experience to massive contract extensions. It was bad. It was a bad year. And there's no one on this planet who can look me in the eye and tell me this was a good year for Swayman, or even a decent year for Swayman, or that he was anywhere close to meeting his expectations. You can tell me that the team in front of him sucked, that a lot of the goals against him were not his fault. A lot. You can't say majority. You can say a lot. You can tell me about all of the turmoil and ridiculousness and the bad defense and whatever. You're right about all of it. It doesn't change the fact that he, to his standard, just didn't meet it this year. Anywhere close to it. At all. At all. To the point where the season's ending with free agents who just came in and have only played 1 year in Boston and have been part of the problem as well. And they're standing in front of a camera saying, everything goes in. Every chance against us goes in. That's what Zadorov said. And I liked it. I liked that comment. I mean, look, I also think that at the time I was like, Zadorov, shut up. You're part of that. But also, yeah, the losing should not be the norm. We should be comfortable with this type of performance, right? That's not what you want your team to be about. You want your team to be desperate to win. And I appreciate the fact that Zadorov and Swayman and many others are pointing out that just hasn't been good enough. That's what I need to hear right now. I still have faith that he will be a great Bruin and will recover from a brutal year for himself. But it needs to start next year. We can't do this for like 3 years running or something like that. He needs to be ready next year immediately. We'll see. But that actually concludes our grades. I'll do timestamps below so that you can just skip around to whatever player you want to hear me chat about. This is a nice casual hour-long video that we're just hanging out chatting grades. Isn't it fun? Oh, the off season. We will be doing series previews for the second round as well. I'm going to lose my voice here pretty soon. I've been talking a lot lately, but so we still have some more videos to do for sure, along with a couple off-season things that I'm working on. So we'll see how all that goes. But as usual, go Bees. Go Bees! And of course, here at the end of the video, I love to give some shout-outs to the fantastic high-quality inspectors who help support the channel and keep this running. I super appreciate every single one of you, from the role player tier, the top line tier, and of course the all-star tier. We are going to do our shout-outs for this top line tier. Thank you so much to Sean Kreider, Michael Kamara, Chris and Erica, Kevin Timperley, Quackin' Platypus, JM, Smoke Channels, Shaggy, Adam Ella, Albert Waldron, Negev79, Lola Cattingsworth, EKM Productions, Moonlighter TV, Big Bad Bruin, The Bugman, Jeff with a G, Tommy Braga, Roland22, GD Viperworks, Len Kreutz, Brock Nope, Hans Slobo, Coach D, The Atomic Lizard, Bradley Johnson, Brett Arney, Pincent, and Nick Zatrullo. Thank you so much, each and every one of you. Your top line material. But now we got to move on to our all-star tier members, the absolute legends. We have Jacob Pratt, Jake Brower, Dampen, JG's 12, Mark S., Ann Hustis, Tim R., Lorenzo Wood, Penny Pasta, Levi Catalani, Boston Stringler, Bagel, Nightmare Eco, John Kirk, Joel, Stealthy Potato, Heil E. Coyote, Darren Woodbury, Abraxion, Wolf Warrior, Vinny, Adrian Winter, Tukton D. Tashi, Bruin Smash, D.A. Kingery, The Only Newts, A Tasty Snack, Dutes42, and Jeremy. Thank you all for all of the support and love that you are all giving. I appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, go Bees!